This video is dedicated to the memory of Genevieve. Our hearts go out to her family during this difficult time. She will be greatly missed. In this episode, we look at the costumes of Arya Stark from the HBO series Game of Thrones, coming up. Welcome back to Costume Co. I do almost weekly videos and I live stream every Saturday night. In this video, and due to popular demand, I feature the costumes of Arya Stark from 7 seasons of Game of Thrones. Let's get right to it. Warning, there will be some spoilers from all 7 seasons of the HBO series Game of Thrones. We've seen Arya Stark grow through the 7 years of Game of Thrones from ages 10 to 17. So when we first encounter her in the Game of Thrones debut, she's just a little girl safe within her family unit. Arya's initial costume is in the cool gray tones of the Stark colors. They're picked up from the sigil of the direwolf. According to costume designer Michelle Clapton, she says, the Starks have less available to them and are in different circumstances as they live in cold, damp weather. Available to them is wool, leather, fur, and some dyes. We have a lot of blues and grays, murkier colors that seemed right for the harsh northern climates. In Winterfell, the peasants would wear wool collars on their cloaks, while nobility would wear wolf pelt collars or rabbit for children like we see on Arya. Here's a shot from the show debut of young Arya wearing a visorless helmet like the ones worn by the Stark soldiers. Here's an example of a similar helmet. This one's a German bassinet made of steel and leather, and it's from 1325 on display at the Met in New York City. Arya has a series of medieval-style gowns, like a medieval bleout or coat, and there is some shaping in the dress with seams and darts, and the detachable sleeves are fitted on the upper arm, and then they're full toward the bottom, and then lined in fur. And just so you know, darts are actually a contemporary fitting technique. There are very few historical medieval gowns in existence, so we have to look to illustrations, paintings, and statues for reference. So here are a few examples that are taken from a 15th century medieval handbook, mainly on health. The gowns that we see here were often fitted or semi-fitted at the bodice with flowing skirts, the shaping coming from lacing at the sides and some seaming at the waist. In this painting, we see an example of side lacing on a cotehardie, as depicted in this 15th century work by early Netherlandish painter Rogier van der Weyden. Additional shaping on Arya's gown comes from the center back lacing. The neckline is decorated with knotted tabs. Clapton said of this, it was quite nice putting Sansa and Arya initially in very similar costumes. You have these sort of tied knotted tops, and of course Sansa's are knotted quite nicely with little embroidery bits on the end and all very nice, and Arya's are just all messy and unknotted and falling apart, and she takes the sleeves off. It's quite nice to have the two of them very similar than to split apart so far away from each other. Arya starts off the season with a pretty split braid updo, looking here a little bit like a young Princess Leia from Star Wars. This is actually a wig, actor Maisie Williams stating that she found it rather itchy. In episode 2, The King's Road, Arya has ditched the sleeves entirely. This peachy linen blouse in the Tully style of her mother is one of 3 blouses that Arya wears throughout season 1. There are 2 drawstrings that create the gathers at the neckline. In this shot, where Arya has turned Joffrey's own sword on him, you can see that she has also added a boy's leather belt to house her sword needle. In this follow-up scene, she's looking more and more disheveled. In King's Landing, Arya wears a brown version of her gown with a black underblouse. The dress looks like it's made of a sort of slub silk. In this picture, you can also see the seams and the hand-worked eyelets where the sleeves are meant to attach. This dress has the same knotted tabs along the collar. Pictured in the center is one of Arya's dresses on exhibit, although to my knowledge, this particular cape was never used. For the turning of the hand, Arya wears the same gown without sleeves and then the soft gray muslin blouse that we see from episode 1. Arya also wears one of the padded collars worn by her sister Sansa and her mother Catelyn. She wore it once before at the Stark banquet at Winterfell. Here's a studio shot of the collar with embroidery by principal embroidery artist Michelle Carragher. The collar is decorated with acorn tassel trim. Arya trains in the water dance under Bravasi master sword fighter and instructor Cyril Farrell. Arya trades in her dress for linen trousers. Maisie Williams said that they were brands, and a fencing skirt, which is a quilted canvas leg covers meant to protect your legs from slashes and blows. With her hair pulled back Ned Stark style, she is looking more and more like her father. She's also added a neck scarf or cravat. This item is worn by most men in Winterfell, but as you can see on the right, Arya's mother also wears one. In this screen grab from a behind-the-scenes interview, you can see the texture of the muslin blouse and also Arya's really messy hair. Yoren, a recruiter of the Night's Watch and a good friend to Arya's uncle Benjen, protects Arya as her father Eddard is being executed. He then cuts Arya's hair with a knife to pass her off as an orphan boy and then smuggles her out of King's Landing. In Season 2, Arya adds this medieval doublet-like garment, and she will wear this all the way through until Season 4. Maisie Williams stated that the jacket was stolen off a dead person. And at first, Williams didn't want to cut her hair, but in the end, she liked how little time it took to get into costume compared to the other cast who wore wigs. Layers of grease and dirt were added to her hair and skin, which she said was difficult to shampoo out. While the origins of Arya's coat are likely from a slightly earlier period, here's an example that I wanted to show you of a British leather doublet that's on the right, and it dates from 1630 to 1625, and it's from the V&A. According to the museum in London, they say, the use of leather for a doublet usually indicates an informal garment for outdoor wear, for example, hunting or traveling. The very fine embroidery and fashionable style of this example, however, implies that it was worn by a member of aristocracy. The entire doublet, which is a rather complicated bit of construction, is comprised of strips of fabric. So I'm not entirely certain, but I think it looks like dyed canvas that's been coated or glazed. Just to show you what I think it is, here are two types of undyed canvas that look like the fabric. One is a cotton linen blend and the other one is a cotton duck cloth. The sections of Arya's jacket are created by lashing strips of canvas together with leather lacing through offset holes. Now each section, there's two front pieces, one back piece, and two sets of two-piece sleeves are then bound with leather and then lashed all together. It's only the front opening of the garment that features hand-worked eyelets with crisscross lacing. The idea that the garment could be taken on and off over the head with just a bit of loosening, although it appears that Arya eats, sleeps, and works in the outfit without ever removing it. As Clapton has often stated, you can almost smell the costume. Here's a pretty good shot of the back of the jacket. Here's a picture of Arya's entire costume from a Game of Thrones exhibit in Amsterdam. Here are a few close-ups also taken from that same exhibit. You can see an enormous amount of distressing on the costumes. The work by the breakdown team of Game of Thrones is just first-rate. Here's a good look at her footwear. I think these are actually different than her Season 1 booties. From the same exhibit, here's Arya's sword needle with her sword belt. You can see how small it is compared to Ned Stark's Valyrian greatsword Ice, which is pictured on the left. Her shirt, which started out as a light beige, and her pants have become grungier, as we see in Season 3 episode Dark Wings, Dark Words with Gendry and Hot Pie, and in the episode The Bear and the Maiden Fair. While it appears that Arya is wearing the same set of clothes for 3 years in a row, multiples were created for actor Maisie Williams as she grew. According to Michelle Clapton, Maisie was very, very keen to get rid of the last costume. She said, "Please, can I burn it?" Upon arrival to the House of Black and White in Season 5, Arya finally can toss the Fleabag-ridden costume into the river. The costume was eventually fished out by the production team and archived for future exhibitions, hopefully after it was dried out. Arya's House of Black and White costume is nearly identical to the waif, although it looks like it has a bit more shaping. So according to Michelle Clapton, the flap of fabric on the costume was designed to put over the face when dealing with dead bodies, also reflecting the use of disguises as faceless men. Michelle Clapton says, "Unlike Sansa, who chooses to change and express herself, Arya just adopts costumes to the situation or place that she's in. It's not about Arya, it's about the person she's playing." From this angle, you can see that the dress has quite a bit of fullness, blousing out over her belt. Like the waif, Arya wears a shift underneath her dress. Here's a close-up of the structure of the dress. While it's a very simple design, the top and skirt are made of wide strips of dyed black cotton, and then the whole thing is broken down. And according to the Blu-ray extras, the texture of the costume worn in the House of Black and White are designed to echo the texture of the building's walls. Here's Arya's undertunic. As you can see, it's pretty much a shapeless garment, except for a bit of pleating at the shoulder seams. And like all of her costumes so far, it's heavily distressed. Toward the end of Season 5, and disguised as Lana the Oyster Seller, Arya finally gets to wear something pretty. Designer Michelle Clapton said that Arya's street vendor barrel girl costume is inspired a bit by Russian costumes with fabric made to look like filigreed copper. The skirt has 2 layers with a slightly frayed, unfinished hem. From this Entertainment Weekly photo shoot, Arya is wearing a bolero-style jacket, cotton blouse, pleated skirt with a shawl, belt, and a pouch and leather gloves. Here is Michelle's original sketch for Arya's costume that's taken from the Entertainment Weekly article, and then on the right is her costume on display at a Game of Thrones exhibit. According to the sketch, Clapton originally had intended Arya's jacket to be this oxidized copper, which as you can see here looks sort of green, but then she changed it to the golden color that we see on the right. Sadly, the skirt on display is very crushed, possibly from the time in storage, and not at all how it looked in the show. Here's a good shot of Arya's sunburst pleated skirt in Season 6. This type of skirt is a common garment worn by both men and women in Braavos, most notably the bankers. She tops off the skirt with a macrame shawl. Macrame is a form of textile produced using a knotting technique for a variety of uses, including shawls, window treatments, handbags, and wall decor. The word macrame comes from the Arabic word migrama, meaning fringe, although it is also associated with the Turks. One of the earliest recorded uses of macrame-style knots as decoration appeared in the carvings of the Babylonians and Assyrians, and sailors used macrame to create hammocks and other useful items as a way to pass time while at sea. Materials used most in macrame include cords made of cotton twine, linen, hemp, jute, leather, or yarn. One of the most interesting aspects of Arya's costume is this doublet-like jacket. It's comprised of 2 layers. The base is a brocade and the top layer looks like a macrame lace overlay. Once the pieces are attached, usually with a process like flap basting, they are treated and sewn as one piece. Here are a few examples of macrame textiles. This lace is commonly used for tablecloths, window valances, and also in the bridal industry. And since macrame lace is often made from natural fibers like silk, cotton, or linen, it takes dye very well. The bodice and wings are created as one piece, while the sleeves are detachable with the edges bound like we see in her jackets in Season 7. In this close-up, you can see the heavy distressing done on the textile. This might have been done with dye, but it also looks like paint might have been applied after the jacket was constructed. And then they've added this rough cloth scarf, which looks like boiled wool or linen. In this close-up, Arya styles her hair like many of the girls and women in Braavos, starting with a severe center part. The 2 sections are braided toward the front and then are finished off on each side. Her hair is decorated with what look like leather, although they could be metal cutouts of flowers and leaves. In this close-up, you can see that Arya's leather gloves have this fine nail detail on the palms. William wore these gloves to protect her hands from the sharp shells when oyster shucking. blinded at the end of Season 5 by Jaqen, Arya starts off Season 6 in this ragged beggar costume. Rags seem to look the same no matter where you go in Westeros and Essos. Heavy and coarse textiles, heavily distressed and frayed. I think Arya is wearing the same sandals from the House of Black and White. Arya returns to dressing like a boy as a way to blend in Braavos. She achieves this by wearing her hair down like the men do, at least the ones with shoulder-length hair, and she's wearing a jerkin, poet shirt, and trunk hose made from homespun fabrics. Her outfit is actually nearly identical to the man on her left, except that she wears leg wraps and shoes instead of slouchy boots. Arya's jerkin is constructed from a nubby woven cloth with cap sleeves and a short peplum, the center front crisscross lace through the metal grommets. From a historical standpoint, lace eyelets would have all been hand-sewn, usually with a bound buttonhole stitch, as metal grommets weren't introduced until the 19th century. Her trunk hose are also laced up at the center front. Arya returns to Winterfell, disguised as a serving girl in order to execute Walder Frey. All of the Frey women dress in this ugly bottle green color, a color that looks terrible on any skin tone, which is perhaps the intention. Here's a screen grab of Maisie Williams wearing the costume, and in standard light it looks more leaf green, but just as ugly. In this promo shot from Season 7, Arya wears peasant-style traveling clothing. Her cape is a modified northern cloak, very reminiscent of the Starks. The cape is a very rough and distressed cloth with leather crossover straps, and her collar piece is suede instead of a wolf pelt, which is the traditional Stark garb. After Arya returns to Winterfell and is reunited with her two siblings, she finally gets to toss her traveling rags, changing into her new duds in time to have a quick bout with Brienne. Arya has completely embraced masculine clothing, wearing a brown leather doublet, suede pants and tall boots, and a fencing skirt in House Stark colors. Here is a detailed studio shot of the complete costume. The brown leather jerkin has detachable sleeves, and the quilting is similar to the one worn by Arya's father, Ned Stark. Clapton said, "Ned was the one who got her lessons in swordplay. Ned was her hero, and I love that she came back and she almost wants to be her father. She's got a nobility to her now." In this close-up, of course, we see Arya's sword needle and her newly acquired Valyrian steel dagger. I really like the quilted gray cloth skirt panels, bound in matching brown leather, again, a nod to her father, and the whole look is finished off with a hand-tooled leather belt doubled around her waist. Clapton has put together a medieval equivalent of a capsule wardrobe for Arya with interchangeable pieces. So in this scene, Arya has swapped out the leather vest portion of the doublet for this quilted vest instead. The sleeves and the leather belt, however, are the same. Here's a great close-up of the machine embroidery that creates a triglyph or Y-shaped motif. The grommets are metal, as we've seen in the majority of the Game of Thrones costumes. Here is Michelle Clapton's rendering of Arya's Season 7 costume. From the Season 7 promo, here's Arya's new cape. The cape is lined in a mottled fur, likely faux fur, since in Season 7, Clapton attempted to move away from real fur. Here are two great examples of high-end faux fur from Active Fabrics in the UK that are similar to Arya's cloak lining. So we have polar wool faux fur on the left and gold faux fur on the right. The shape of the cape is almost like a Greek chlamys, the way this asymmetrical garment is worn over the head with one arm slipping out. It's fastened, again in an asymmetrical fashion, on the leather shoulder bit with lacing. Here, Arya wears her leather doublet, and you can see the top of the sleeves are bound with matching leather and then attached under the cuffs of the jerkin vest. Arya's square pattern on her coat is reminiscent of her father Ned Stark costume, namely his gambeson, which he wore as a protective undergarment. YouTube viewer Althea pointed out to me that Arya's square motif is reflective of the House of Black and White. That's the temple in Braavos dedicated to the many-faced god. And you can see on the doors behind her the square pattern that looks similar to the one on her cape. Viewer Lovey-Dovey also mentioned that it looks like the squares that hold the faces in the Hall of Faces. One of my viewers named Nina is a knitter with a degree in textile design, and she told me that Arya's cloak fabric looks like a waffle weave where you achieve the long floats which create the grid-like pattern. It's been probably done very loosely and in a nice thick yarn. I think you can't achieve the effect of the grid being so pronounced with a knit very easily. Here's an example of this type of weaving that's referred to as giant waffle weaving, and it's by Japanese textile designer Hiroko Takeda. And by the end of the season, Arya is looking full-on Ned Stark and has replaced her cloth fencing skirt with these more durable leather tabs. Here's an on-set picture of actor Maisie Williams in her costume. Here are some promo shots of Arya from an Entertainment Weekly photo shoot. If you look closely, you'll see that the skirt also has a squared motif. That ends this video and the costumes of Arya Stark. If you enjoyed this video, please consider sharing it out. I'll be back next week with another video, so if you want to see more of this kind of content, please consider subscribing. And as always, thank you so much for watching.